Welcome to Sartor TV. I'm Jennifer Crumpton. Today I'm speaking with Gillian Zoe Segal. She's the author of Getting There, a book of mentors. Welcome, Gillian.
Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. I wanted to start with a little bit about you and your career background. You've gone from law school to photography to an author. Tell us a little bit about your career journey.
Well, when I was in law school, I realized that I didn't want to, in fact, practice law, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. So shortly after, I read a commencement address that was given at my alma mater, the University of Michigan, and the speaker was Kathy Geisweit, who's actually a cartoonist. She ran the Kathy comic strip. And yeah, it's not going anymore, but it was very popular back then. And she suggested that the graduates do an exercise when they were deciding what to do with the rest of their lives. And she said, think about all of the classes and remember what you love. And if you remember what you love, you'll remember who you are. And if you remember who you are, you can do anything. So I literally did her exercise, and I thought, you know, I really loved that photography course that I took. And so that brought me to take a photography course at the International Center of Photography in New York, and that started me off on my path. And my first book was, it was called New York Characters, and it was half photography and a little bit of writing. And now this next book is a lot of writing and a little bit of photography. So things evolve.
What do you think has made you so successful along your journey, able to make these transitions?
Well, I guess, you know, what both of the projects that I embarked on, both of the books I was really passionate about. And there was a long gap in between because I knew what hard work a book is and how dedicated you have to be to it. And I knew that if it wasn't something that really captured me, I would never have the energy to do it.
What role, if any, have mentors played in your career and in your life?
Well, what's interesting is that that I decided to do this book, Getting There, a book of mentors, because I never really had a career mentor growing up. And I was in need of one. So I thought I would love to, you know, sit down with all of these incredible luminaries and see what they have to teach me. And that's what I did. And I figured if I was interested in that material, then other people would be too.
What advice do you have for young people who may be coming out of college, entering the business world or whatever their industry is and wanting to rise to the top?
I think one of the main themes in Getting There is that every single person in the book is doing something that they're really passionate about. So my advice would be to pick something that you're passionate about, but also Warren Buffett takes this theme one step further, and he says you should do something within what he calls your circle of competence. And so it's very important to know your strengths and your weaknesses and pursue something that you're actually good at. You know, you've got to be realistic, and so you can't do something because you think you should if it's not something that's within your circle of competence.
And it's funny how there can be so much pressure to do otherwise.
Yes, yes, but you can't really, you know, fit a square peg into a round hole.
Right.
People can do something that they're not quite meant to do, or they could do something for the wrong reasons and they can do okay, but they're never going to really rise to the top unless there's that, you know, fire in the belly or that passion. Well, it's also important to really not be afraid of failure because no matter what you do, you know, it's going to be hard, and everybody encounters failure along the way. So I guess if there were two things that I would say, it's something you're passionate about, and don't get paralyzed by the fear of failure. Just expect it and keep on trucking when that happens.
What do you think makes a great leader?
I think a great leader is someone who thinks for themselves. The opposite of a leader is a follower. So followers look to see what other people are doing, and leaders don't really care so much what other people are doing. They want to do what they think is right. And then I guess the other quality is a great leader has to be able to inspire other people to follow him or her.
How did working on Getting There help you to reflect on your own life?
I think, first of all, it made me a lot tougher. Because after you see all of these people who you kind of had imagined had a smooth, steady ride to the top, and after you learn that they, in fact, were met with failures and setbacks and all of that, it makes you a little bit more able to stand up to that yourself. And in my life, there have been times where I've had an idea and somebody, it could be someone in my family or some friend said something negative about that idea, and I dropped it.
Right.
And I know now that you can't do that, because no matter what it is, if you invented the internet before the internet existed, there would be somebody who would say, why would you want to send an email if you could make a phone call or whatever?
There's naysayers.
Yeah, there's naysayers for every single thing. So if you really believe in something, you've got to kind of pursue it. And then you can't pursue every single thing to the death, because some things aren't good ideas. But anyway, it made me a little, not give up so early.
There are so many amazing stories in this book from incredible people. But what would you say overall is the big idea that you want people to walk away with after reading this book?
The biggest idea is that the role that determination and resilience plays in success. And that ties into some other themes. If you're not passionate about what you're doing, you won't have that determination. And if you are afraid of failure, then you won't even be in a position where you have to be resilient, if you let fear of failure paralyze you. But so basically, that's the big theme of the book, and there's small little themes that pipe into it.
So you successfully made career transitions in your journey. Tell me what it was like to get your first book published when you were really just very new to the whole scene.
That was not easy. I had just, taken a 1-year photography course, and I wanted to get my book published. So I ran the idea by a bunch of people at the International Center of Photography, and everyone said, you should first intern and then build up a portfolio, and then a few years down the line, maybe you should think about this, but kind of, who are you whippersnapper, to be thinking
because you were just out of the photography
yes,
school.
to be thinking that you could have a book. I think out there in the world, there's a big fraternity mentality, which is like, you've got to go through this hazing process before you deserve to get anywhere. But I think there's often ways around traditional routes. So I did try the traditional route of trying to get an agent and show them my idea and then have them shop it around to get the book published. But I could not even get an agent. And so I decided to just shop it around myself. And what I did is I went to the bookstore and I looked at different books, and I made a list of publishing houses who might publish my type of book, because you need to pitch to the right person. And then I looked in the acknowledgments of certain books to see which editor at the publishing house was thanked. So I knew exactly who to target, because once again, you need to go for the right person. And I had the name of a man up top on my list, and then I looked at the books he had done, and I found that one of my teachers at ICP had worked with him. And so I said, could you make the introduction? And it didn't happen quickly. The guy said, well, I'm going to Florida next month. I'll do it when I get back, that kind of thing. Yeah, pushed him gently into just making that phone call, and then I was on my own. And I pitched it, and they liked it, and that's how I got my first book published.
You interview so many fascinating leaders and celebrities across so many different industries. How did you decide who to include in the book?
Well, I wanted to hear from a diverse group of people in a diverse group of fields, and I thought it would be interesting to see what the themes were. So basically, I had to throw a lot of requests out there to get anyone to say yes. So basically, I was after a diverse group of people who I admired. But I got 30 incredible ones, and I didn't get a lot of people. But I kept dancing until the curtain closed. So,
what was the most surprising story to you out of all these hugely successful people?
One of the most surprising ones to me was that Warren Buffett was petrified of public speaking through his time in college. Like, it was only right as he was starting business school that he signed up for a Dale Carnegie public speaking course, and that changed his life. And I know him, I see him on TV. He has his annual shareholders meeting every year, and there he is in front of 40 or 50,000 people talking for hours and hours, and he's so comfortable. And it's just incredible to me that he was ever so afraid of it that he would literally throw up just at the thought of it.
And I love that in your book, he tells you that the only thing he has framed is not his Ivy League degrees, it's his Dale Carnegie speaking course graduation.
He says that course had the biggest impact on his subsequent success. It was bigger than any other degree he has. So,
it seems like so many people who I interview tell me when I ask that they never really had formal mentors, especially not in the traditional sense of a mentor that you stay with. I wonder how mentorship is changing in our world today, and how does that make your book even more relevant right now?
Well, I think it's a hot topic now. It's something that people are talking about, which is great because I think people are realizing how important it is to learn from others and to be there for others to learn from you. And I also think we're really fortunate in this day and age because, it's awesome if you could have a one-on-one thing with somebody and go out to lunch and dinners with your mentor. But that's just not a reality in a lot of people's lives. So the fact that we have the internet and we have so much at our fingertips, you can really have virtual mentors these days in a way that you can hear people talking, you can read books like mine, and there's a lot of ways to sort of feel like you have a mentor, even if you can't get that person to actually be your mentor.
Sitting down with some of the most famous people in the world and getting advice from them, what was your process for putting together the book?
I actually did meet with everybody that I interviewed, and I sat down and I transcribed our conversation. So it was all their own words, and then I took that transcript, which was probably about 20 pages, and I cut it down to like 5 or 6 pages. So each person has 5 or 6 pages, and they're really concise, and it's in their own words. And then I would send that essay back to the subject for approval. So, when you edit somebody's words, you've got to be careful. So every single person got to read it over and make sure that they were comfortable with how they came across and that it sounded like them. So I'm glad it does.
Several of the stories in the book illustrate how big disappointment or failure or some twist in the person's life actually turned out to be a positive. And really sort of helped propel them towards success. Can you share one of those with us?
Well, a huge one is Michael Bloomberg's story. He worked at Salomon Brothers, and he loved it. He worked there for years, like maybe 15 years, and one day the company got sold and it got restructured, and he got fired. He was devastated about it. Nobody swooped in to give him another job. And that is when he decided to start his own company. And that's how he got on the path that he is on now. And he, is one of the richest men in the world and was mayor of the city of New York for 3 consecutive terms. And who knows if that would happen if he was a company guy at Salomon. Some people say, failure is life's way of nudging you in a different direction, and that it was sort of meant to be.
So Mad Men has been a tremendously popular show, to say the least, and you sat down with Matthew Weiner.
Yes.
What was something interesting that he had to say about his journey?
First of all, it took 7 years from the time he wrote that script till it got on the air. It got rejected all over Hollywood. He sort of just stuck to his guns, he stuck to his vision, and eventually the show that he wanted got picked up by AMC. And back then, it was when no one had even heard of AMC, and people felt sorry for him. He says it was as if it was being screened in someone's basement. But really, you know, now everyone knows AMC. But something he said that I love is that when you get rejected, you should register the fact that someone doesn't want your work, but don't always listen to the reason why. And he says that a lot of times people give a capricious justification for why they don't want you or whatever it is you're hawking. They'll say something just to stop from hurting your feelings. And if you listen to that, you're going to be running around in like all different directions trying to please an imaginary audience, and it can be really damaging and destructive. So, you know, in his case, he would hear, all right, we don't want to do this show because of this or that or this or that, but he really stuck to what he envisioned it to be.
What qualities do you think helped Sarah Blakely stumble into Spanx?
She grew up wanting to be a lawyer. That was her dream. And when it finally came time to take the bar, she bombed it. She did terribly. So she picked herself up and she took a course and took it again, and she did 1 point worse.
Oh, gosh.
I know. So then she drove off and got a job loading rides at Epcot Center in a polyester pantsuit. And that eventually transitioned, you know, she left that and she got a job selling fax machines door to door. And she did that for 8 years. So during that time, she was wearing a white pair of pants, and she did not like how her butt looked in them.
That happens a lot.
Yeah, white pants are tough. Anyway, so she wished that she could wear control top pantyhose, but without the feet, because she wanted to wear sandals. And that didn't exist back then. So she thought, okay, I'm going to invent this, and this is my big idea. So she kept her ideas secret for a good year. She told her friends and family that she was working on something, but she wouldn't say what. And when she finally told them, all right, it's footless pantyhose, they laughed at her. They thought she was joking. And then when they realized she wasn't joking, they tried to help her out by saying, you know, sweetie, if this was a good idea, wouldn't the big guys be doing it? And well, if it is a good idea, then they'll just knock you off right away and copy you. But she had been working on Spanx for over a year and was too invested in it to give up, which kind of comes back to what I was saying about giving up early when people laugh at you or think it's not a good idea. And she eventually turned Spanx into $1 billion business. But she credits a lot of what allowed her to do that to her job selling fax machines for 8 years. Because doing that, she had to really get stamina. You know, she would go door to door and get her card ripped up. She would have police escorts out of buildings. And it made her not afraid of rejection and immune to the word no, basically. And when she had to get Spanx off the ground, it was really tough. She tried to get a prototype made, and she had to drive around to all these different mills and beg people. You know, she couldn't get an appointment. She would camp out, and just to get them to make a Spanx prototype. But she used a lot of her training and, you know, door-to-door sales, and she also used to do stand-up comedy on the side. And she used what she learned about that to get free publicity. So she named it Spanx on purpose because it's kind of a funny thing.
Yeah.
And it makes a boring category like pantyhose something funny.
Yeah.
People like to joke about it. People say, I've got my Spanx on, you know.
Yeah.
And so she's had loads and loads of free publicity on Sex and the City and Oprah. Oprah likes them.
I mean, when Oprah likes it, there you go.
Yeah. The rest is history.
Yeah.
So anyway, so she sort of learned a lot from her travels and, you know, her trials and tribulations.
Yeah.
And another thing that she does is she says she's a visualizer. So in her downtime, she says she just sits around and thinks, which a lot of people don't really do these days. And she decided, before she even had the idea for Spanx, that she eventually wanted to, you know, she knew she was good at selling, but she wanted to sell something that she created herself. And she wanted to do it, like have a business where she didn't have to be present all the time, something that could run on its own. So when she finally got the idea for Spanx, it all just clicked. She just knew that was what she was meant to do.
Tell us about how Anderson Cooper used the tragedy in his own life and that empathy that he developed in order to become a successful journalist.
Anderson Cooper, that was another surprising story. A lot of people look at him, and he comes from a very wealthy family, from the Vanderbilt family. And a lot of people look at him and they imagine that, you know, he had a really easy life and that he probably got his foot in the door via connections. But that couldn't be further from the case. So his essay starts where he talks about how his father died undergoing heart bypass surgery when he was 10. And then when he was 21, his 23-year-old brother committed suicide by jumping off of the family's penthouse apartment while his mother pleaded, you know, with him to stay put. And these events really, as you could imagine, affected Anderson Cooper and his psychology. And he just sort of thought the world was a scary place. And those events sort of made him want to go places where other people were in the same boat. So he, you know, would go to war-torn countries, and he says, like, he felt comfortable in places where the language of loss was spoken. But I think that he also wanted to learn from those people, you know, and see how they were able to carry on after experiencing such loss.
What does Kathy Ireland in particular have to say about failure? You would think a supermodel failure.
Right. She's incredible. She became famous originally for being a Sports Illustrated swimsuit model. And now she runs a $2 billion business called Kathy Ireland Worldwide. And it's her own brand. And she brands over 15,000 products. And she's another one, like Anderson Cooper. People look at her and they think, okay, well, if I was born looking like that, then, you know, I could just throw my name on products and run a $2 billion company too. But that is so not the case. That is so not her story. She tried to start her own brand and failed for years. She tried with a lot of different things. She tried a beer company, skincare line, arts and crafts project. She finally did it. She finally was able to launch her own brand with, of all things, a line of socks. And it came about because she was pregnant and somebody offered her the big modeling opportunity to model a pair of socks. And she said...
Everything else was under construction.
Yes,
so
exactly. She said it wasn't really like what she was hoping for, the kind of job offer she was hoping for. But she said, you know what, I won't do it, but I'll do it if we can partner up. If we go into business together. So that's how she started. And she says that if you never fail, you're not trying hard enough. And I just love those words. I think that that's just such a great way to sum it up. And if you could think of failure as just part of the process, then when it happens, you won't feel so defeated. If you could just think, all right, I'm part of the A-team, like I'm doing my job. Then it's a lot easier to get over.
What about Jillian Michaels? She had a very surprising story to me And she talks about career gatekeepers, quote unquote. Tell us more about that.
What's interesting about her is that she now runs a health and wellness empire, but she didn't devote herself to that field until she was fired as a talent agent. So that's another one where you know, she was doing something because she thought she should. She always liked working out and being a trainer, and she was really into health. But she felt like she needed a real job, and she was doing it because she thought she should. So anyway, she says that basically you must get around life's gatekeepers, and gatekeepers are people who stand in your way when you're trying to accomplish something. So she says, you know, if you want to have a television show, and you can't get a network to carry you, do it on the internet. Go on YouTube. Do whatever it is. You just have to keep moving in the direction you want to be in. If you don't do that, you're not going to get to where you want to go.
Rachel Zoe, the fashion designer, talks about how to figure out who to trust in business, which I feel like is always a big struggle no matter what industry you're in.
Yeah, I think probably especially in her industry, because she says it's sort of like high school.
Really? Fashion.
Yes, with a lot of cattiness out there.
Wow.
She's sort of come to the conclusion that you just have to look for people who are honest and loyal, and the rest of it can be learned on the job. And you know, some other people in the book have talked about that as well. And I think if you go in that direction, then you can sort of build a team that sticks together and is like a family. That seems to be what people are doing these days.
You interviewed the Nobel Peace Prize winner, Muhammad Yunus. Why does he say that we should really spend time paying attention to those things that bother us?
His view is that if you see something that bothers you, you should make your own plan to fix it. And that's why he won a Nobel Prize. So he grew up in Bangladesh, and at a certain point, the country was in terrible shape. And he looked around at all of the poor people, and he realized that if they had just a really tiny amount of money, it would completely change their life. But there was no one who would lend money to them. So he decided to start a bank that lent really small amounts of money to the poorest of the poor. And once again, he ran this by a lot of people. He ran this by existing banks. No one would do it. They all thought it was a foolish idea and that he would lose all his money. But he went ahead with the plan himself because nobody else would. And he founded something called the Grameen Bank, and the plan worked, and he won a Nobel Prize for it.
What did Ian Schrager learn from making a really huge mistake in his career, and how did he come back after being in jail?
He was the founder of the famous nightclub Studio 54, and it was, you know, a wild success, and he was young. He did this with his partner, Steve Rubell. And basically, it went to their heads. They thought the rules didn't apply to them. They did not pay income taxes on a lot of their income. And they ended up both going to jail for 13 months. And they lost everything. They came out almost $2 million in debt.
Wow.
And nobody wanted to invest with them, and you know, and they wanted to reinvent themselves in the hotel world. They had an idea to create boutique hotels, which now sounds like create what, but back then it didn't exist. And they also wanted to create lobby socializing, which also wasn't something that happened. Now it's normal that you think you'll go to a cool hotel, even if you live in the city. But it didn't used to be that people who lived in New York would go hang out in hotels. That was for the tourists only. So he got some advice from someone, David Geffen, actually. And he said, you never begin until you begin. And he just realized that, you know, no one was going to come giving him money, but he had to just start doing something and keep his eyes open for new possibilities. So he started by doing something in the club world just to sort of make ends meet. And then eventually an opportunity came up where someone couldn't pay back money, and he got hold of a hotel space, and that's how he, you know, launched his career, his part two. But he's really, you know, an incredible example of determination.
And now his name is just synonymous with famous hotels and gathering spaces.
Yes, and one of the things that got him through his time in prison was reading stories about, you know, people and companies who had suffered great travails and then overcame them. And he told his story to me in an effort to give back, because, you know, he really was at the lowest of lows, you know, in prison and broke. So,
how did Les Moonves' realization that he would never achieve one of his dreams early in his career lead him to his ultimate success?
Well, he actually started out as an actor. And this is what I was talking about earlier with your circle of competence. He basically had to keep on being a bartender to make ends meet. And one day he sort of looked around and he said, you know, I'm just not as good as a lot of these people, and I'm fine, but it just wasn't what he was really good at. And he thought he would give, you know, working on the other side of the camera a try. So he got into producing. He produced a small play with a friend, and one thing led to another, and now he is the president and CEO of CBS. He realized that he liked that better. He actually liked it better.
What example does Michael Bloomberg set about how to treat the people around you, not only the people that you work with, but people who are security guards or all levels of a team?
Yeah, you know, in my book, a lot of people give advice basically on how to build a winning team and keep it together. And he says that people want recognition and respect, and that you should always recognize where credit is due and not be stingy about giving it. I love that advice, you know, for all aspects of life, even in your personal relationships. It's nice to tell people who you appreciate that they are appreciated. And he says that he walks into his office buildings and he'll shake the hand of the doorman, because without them, nobody else could do their job. And he says they're just as important as anybody. And I think that's really like a nice example of what he was saying.
Jillian, thank you so much for being with us today. And your book, Getting There, A Book of Mentors, is just absolutely fascinating. It really does feel like you're sitting on your couch with all of these wonderful mentors giving you great career advice. So
thank you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. This is Sartor TV. I'm Jennifer Crumpton, and we'll see you next time.